So let me get this straight. I come home for summer, and the first thing you guys want me to do is talk about some little robot thing and a cat with elf ears? Yeah, I'd say that's a good way to start the summer. Let's do this thing. Ah, Ratchet and Clank. Man, it's been a while, hasn't it? Ever since the Cy Cooper Marathon, you guys have been requesting me constantly to review the games in this franchise too. Well, that and Jak and Daxter. Then again, all three of these franchises are pretty close with one another, so I shouldn't be surprised. And before I get flooded with comments, yes, I'm gonna cover the Jak and Daxter series at some point. Calm down, guys. I'm just giving Ratchet and Clank the treatment right now, mainly because they have a feature film, which is kind of still surreal to me, honestly. Now for this marathon, I'm going to be looking at the original 4 games on the PS2. There are several other games like the PSP games and the Future series, but I wanted to start small for right now and show you where this franchise got its roots from. And I'm not going to be looking at the movie game right now, mainly because I don't have a PS4 yet. And trying to go from that game immediately into Ratchet 2 feels a little unfair. So now with all of that out of the way, let's look at where this little Lombax came from. Design-wise, you know, not the other way. Yeah. So Insomiac had quite a reputation during the PS1 days, mainly with the Spyro the Dragon franchise and the original trilogy that were very well received and regarded as some of the best games on the system. But with the upcoming PS2, the company decided they were done with the Spyro series and wanted to move on to something new for the upcoming system. They wanted to make something darker with a bigger story and more immersion than what they could get out of the Purple Dragon. And this series would be shown to the public as Girl with a Stick. Okay, well the other name for the game was I-5, but still, Girl with a Stick is just a more memorable name. It just is. It was supposed to be taking notes from both the Zelda and Tomb Raider series, but the developers thought it just wasn't fun, and with a year of progress, the project was scrapped. So they only had just a few months to get a new project in the works. The team figured since they weren't getting success with the Mayan style of I-5, they wanted to try the exact opposite end of the spectrum and do something more futuristic and sci-fi. The team really clicked with the idea and started designing their new protagonist. They wanted to make the new star shine as they weren't really big fans of the protagonist they had for I-5. They originally went with a reptilian alien kind of thing, but as the designs went on, they settled on more of a cat creature. They also wanted him to have a robot companion, but it took the team a long time trying to figure out what kind of robot they wanted. They eventually settled on a more backpack kind of design. The duo was shown to the world in March of 2002, and after some amazing commercials, seriously, look these up, these are so good. The game came out November that year and was a big hit for Insomiac and received very high praise from critics. But that was back in 2002, and I got into the series around 2008, I want to say? So does it still hold up today? Now for these reviews, I'll be looking at their original PS2 releases, as the PS3 collection has some awful bugs in them. Both visual and sound issues are all over the place that make them really inferior to the original releases, especially in the digital versions where there's even more bugs. The only real reason to play Ratchet 1 on the PS3 is for the widescreen support, which the original game doesn't have. But considering all the other problems, I don't think that makes it worth it. So, let's get this thing started with the original Ratchet and Clank. It's a GameStop cover, you know. I got the disc right here. It's just, you know, at the time, let's start this thing. Yeah. Our tale begins with Ratchet. A young Lombax, which is the cat-like thing, is on a lonely planet called Veldin, trying to work on a ship in order to explore more planets. But he's missing the robotic ignition system, the crucial final part of his ship. Meanwhile, on a robotic assembly line, there's a malfunction that ends up creating a tiny robot. V425, screw it, I'm just calling him Clank. Anyways, he sees an infobot that shows him something really bad. Or at least something that justifies his face. He escapes with the infobot and then gets onto a ship and flies away. But he's later shot down on Veldin. Ratchet, seeing the explosion, goes to investigate and takes the little bot for himself. Clank shows in the video on the infobot that's from Ultimate Supreme Executive Chairman Drek. Yeah, try fitting that onto a name tag. Drek says that his race, the Blarg, have polluted their planet and have overpopulated so much that their planet is no longer habitable. So they plan on making a new planet by taking parts of other planets to form a new one, killing all the other planets in the process. He tries to come off very professional about it, but he's really a mass murderer that needs to be stopped. Clank happens to have in him the robotic ignition system that can fly Ratchet's ship, so they make a deal. If Clank can fly him to the different planets, Ratchet will help save the galaxy from Drek. Now that's the overall goal, but there's a lot more subplots that happen throughout the game. Each planet you go to has its own plotline and characters that you interact with. Like Captain Quark, who's a big-time celebrity superhero who becomes a recurring character throughout the series, Skid McMarks, who's the face of hoverboard racing, the Plumber, who's kind of a running gag throughout the series, Big Al, who upgrades Clank on the second planet of the game, and much more. The interactions are always fun and welcome, and they can be pretty humorous.
You will find raritanium for me.
No, I will not.
Piece of junk.
The story isn't mind-blowing by any means, but I think for the first entry of the series, it does a good job of establishing the universe and characters. Other than one part, but I'll get into that later. For now, let's move on to the presentation. The presentation for 2002? It's pretty solid. The game feels like a cartoon with its characters' designs and worlds, and everything looks great. The character models still hold up pretty well, and the animation feels very natural and not out of place. All the planets carry their own themes and are very well done, and all feel very different from one another. Whether it be a planet of lava, a resort, ice, or bustling city, the game keeps changing the scenario and you're always seeing something new. That is, if you can see it. I noticed some areas were way too dark and made it very hard to see where I was going. Mainly on the first real boss planet, where it's way too dark for its own good. Or really, any time you're in a cave now that I think about it. The script writing is very well done for the different interactions that you have with people. Everyone feels like they have something to say right as soon as the other person is done, and it makes it have a lot of energy throughout the cutscenes. That, along with the humor of the game, make these very enjoyable. I also love when you get infobots, which give you the coordinates to the next planet. They show a TV ad of sorts parodying all types of different television, and these never got tiring for me, and some of the most humorous parts of the game.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Cut!
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, sniveling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my... We're still on? Well, turn it off, you idiot!
The music of Ratchet and Clank has a very distinct style to it. It's a lot of techno, electronic, or heavy beat tracks that you mainly listen to when you want to blow stuff up. I don't really remember any tracks outside of the game, but they all work perfectly in the game itself and add a lot to each planet. And lastly, there's the voice acting, which I find pretty good all around. There's not really a bad performance anywhere. Voices like Clank, Captain Quark, and especially Chairman Drek always stood out to me the most. Though I do think Ratchet sounds a little too pre-teeny for me, but it's still pretty good. So the presentation for Ratchet and Clank is great overall, even after all of this time. But while the presentation has aged well, how is the gameplay? Ratchet and Clank is an action-adventure platformer. I use platformer very loosely. Sure, there's some basic platforming here and there, but most of the game centers around you using your weapons in order to fight and solve puzzles. Ratchet is able to crouch, double jump, wall jump, and swipe or throw his wrench. But most of his mobility comes from Clank, who rides on his back. Clank will allow Ratchet to long jump, high jump, and hover. Ratchet will also get a few more abilities through various gadgets that he can obtain throughout the game, such as an O2 mask to breathe underwater, pilot helmet that allows him to drive spaceships, a hydro pack for swimming faster, magnet boots to walk on certain paths, or grind boots to, well, grind, a swing shot to swing to new heights, trespasser to complete door puzzles, and much more. But the biggest part of the game is the combat you get with your weapons, that you can buy from various Gadgetron vendors for a certain amount of bolts, the game's currency. The weapons can really vary from bombs, pistols, flamethrowers, rockets, vacuum guns, you know, the usual stuff. In terms of big collectibles, there's two primarily. The most prominent are gold bolts. They don't do much at first, but when you beat the game and do New Game Plus, or find this little room on the second boss planet, you can buy gold versions of most of your weapons. Some get more power, bigger range, or new abilities, like the Golden Devastator that's able to hit an enemy 3 times with one rocket. The other major collectibles are skill points. These are kind of like achievements that you get when you perform different parts of the game. Getting these unlocks a lot of stuff in your goodies menu, such as cheats, concept art, the TV ads, or posters for various things in the Ratchet universe. It's like they knew. But anyway, the main structure of each planet is being dropped off in a hub area, and then having multiple branching paths, each one leading to their own challenges for Ratchet and Clank to deal with, and on completion, they will receive a power-up or an info bot to go to their new planet. Things do get changed up on different planets, such as the hoverboard races, controlling Clank in a Pikmin-like playstyle where you have to command robots to either follow you, attack, wait, or enter a blue containment unit, having a giant Clank battle, fighting in a plane, and much, much more. At the end of each act, I guess you want to call it, you have a boss fight. They're good breaks in between the action, but nothing's too memorable. Except for that last boss against Drek, who can really put up a fight. But anyway, that's the first Ratchet's gameplay. So what did I like in this first outing? Ratchet and Clank has a lot of elements I do enjoy. For one, I love the sense of humor throughout the game. There's never a dull moment in a cutscene, which makes it feel like a very well-crafted cartoon, and it did get a lot of giggles out of me throughout the scenes, with a few big laughs here and there. Next, the variety in this game is insane. You're always presented with something new on each planet, like a minigame, a new type of obstacle, or various different gameplay elements in general. But they all still feel like they relate to the main gameplay, so all of these are welcomed. It mixes things up all the time and keeps you on your toes. Special mention to the Trespasser, whose puzzles I legitimately got a kick out of, and are some of my favorites throughout the series. You need to connect beans to different receivers. It starts off simple, but you really will need to think about them later on, and it's a cool change of pace. The worlds you go to are also very enjoyable, and they do make you feel like you're exploring different parts of a galaxy. And of course, I love the weapons, and using them is a blast. Pun entirely intended. Especially in New Game Plus, where you get to use the gold weapons and a certain other weapon. Longtime Ratchet fans, you know exactly where I'm going with this. See, in Blackwater City, there's a guy that can give you a rhino, a Ripya, a new one. Yeah. It's a giant rocket launcher that's an absolute game breaker, and you can get it for the price of 150,000 bolts. Yeah. That's gonna take a while to unlock. So unless you do a certain infinite bolt glitch, you're going to need to play through the game multiple times just to have that amount of bolts. But I never had an issue doing so because the game is very replayable, and I'm always finding out new things each time I play through it, which is the sign of a fantastic game. But there is some shaky ground here and there. Ratchet and Clank does have a few faults. Nothing that brings the game down too much in my opinion, but let's go over them. One would be your selection of weapons. Granted, this was the first go-around and I understand I'm playing it safe, but I barely used any of these weapons. I only used 6 throughout my entire adventure. The bomb glove, which does become less useful as you go on, the pyrocitor, the blaster, the suck cannon, devastator, and visibomb. That's it. Most of the others I just couldn't find a use for, and if you want to try them for yourself, you're gonna need to spend a lot of bolts, and they are not plentiful in this title. I only had enough bolts to buy 4 weapons, the gold suck cannon, and the health upgrades. I didn't have much more money to do anything else by the end of this, and this was a run that I made sure to look in almost every area I could. There's not a good way to get a lot of money fast, and it makes your tool set feel rather limited by the end of the run. And as I alluded to, you need those health upgrades because your health gauge is pretty small, and any kind of hit takes a full nanotech away. From a huge missile to a little bullet you couldn't see. That health is now gone and you're gonna be dying a lot because of that. You can upgrade your health to 8 points with this vending machine later on, but to get that much costs you 40,000 bolts in order to do so, which takes a huge chunk of the money you use on the run. And some of the big problems for why you get hit so much are 2 big things. One, when you're trying to get your weapons from the quick select, the action doesn't pause around you. So when you're trying to prepare for the situation, you're most likely gonna get hit from something you couldn't even see. Now you can go to the pause menu and select your weapon that way, but it's overall very clunky and time consuming. And then there's the fact that there's no strafing feature for any of your weapons. The only thing that comes close to it is this jetpack upgrade for Clank, and it's pretty clunky and impractical. And considering you're using weapons most of the time, that's a big problem. So if you want to move and shoot, you better be positioned correctly at all times. And that combined with the health issue from before, you get the point. There's also all of the mini-games on various planets. Sadly, I can't call all of them that great. I never found myself liking the Clank sections, as they're very slow-paced and feel like they drag for a really long time. Granted, there are only 2 of these, so it's not too painful. But what is painful is the hoverboard racing minigame on Blackwater City. Remember what I said about the races in Sly 1? You can pretty much copy and paste everything I said there and put it here. And it is literally the exact same. Even down to the fact where the first race is the harder one. The control without the booster feels so slippery, and you basically can't afford to screw up one time or else you're gonna lose. And there's TNT boxes everywhere. And that skill point, oh, good luck. And lastly, I would say part of the story to me is a weak point. And it's mainly the second act where Ratchet and Clank start fighting with one another. Now I understand this in terms of story and character development and all of that. I don't have a problem with the idea of it. It's more that Ratchet comes off way too harsh in all of these. And he does have a good reason to act like this, but it starts to get on your nerves fast, and I kind of just wanted him to shut up after the 3rd planet. Again, it's a minor thing, and it was the first go-around, so I'm a bit more lenient on that kind of stuff. Now, this did seem like a long list of complaints, but trust me when I say they don't get in the way that much of the actual game. They're really just nitpicks at the end of the day. And honestly, I didn't spend too much time on the good just because the gameplay itself is pretty self-explanatory. Now, that being said, Ratchet and Clank's gameplay is so much fun and definitely holds up. For the first outing, I have to say Ratchet and Clank has really held up well. It's a fun game that's very easy to get into for newcomers of the series, and I can still easily recommend it. But I think it kind of falls into the same realm of Sly 1, where it's just shy of being a fantastic game in my eyes with a lot of the problems that are here. Though I would say I think this one has aged a little bit better than Sly 1. I wouldn't say this is the best game in the series, far from it, but there's still enjoyment to be had, and I think it's definitely worth giving a shot. And that's it for Ratchet 1. Again, I think it's held up really well, and I do want to try the game on PS4 at some point, but I'll cover that for one when I get a PS4, and after I cover the future series, because it has a lot more elements from that series of 4 games than the games I'm looking at for this marathon. Speaking of that marathon, next time we're gonna kick it up a notch with Ratchet and Clank Going Commando. Yeah, that's the name of the game. See you then. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, like the video down below so that way I know that you liked the video. I'm just saying. If you're new to the channel, check out my other reviews on the left, or if you're watching this in the future, check out the Going Commando review on the right. If you want to follow me, check me out on Facebook and Twitter because I update them quite frequently. And if you want to support the show directly, go to my Patreon. All the money in there goes right back into production. By the way, thank you Soul Ninja Star, Arcana, and Shy Ranger for being my top patrons. Thank you guys, you're awesome! And just letting you guys know, the next review is gonna be a long one, so give me some time with this one. Anyway, I'll see you then.